One day, World War II will end. And when it does, some of the last defenders of the German Reich will be the feared and fanatical Waffen-SS. But not all its soldiers will be the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, thoroughbred Germans that spring to mind when you think about this elite fighting force. In fact, around half of them will be foreign-born non-Germans. This episode is the first part of the story about how the Waffen-SS becomes this multinational army. This is a special episode of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. The Schutzstaffel, literally protective squadron, is the honor guard of National Socialism. Various forms of it existed for some years, but it is officially founded in 1925 as a small paramilitary organization responsible for protecting Nazi party leaders, in particular the German Führer Adolf Hitler. In 1929, Heinrich Himmler is made commander with the title of Reichsführer SS. Under his direction, the SS grows to become the primary agent of Nazi terror in the Third Reich. With their motto of Meine Ehre heißt Treue, my honor is called loyalty, they are the vanguard of the Nazi party, meant to represent everything good and pure about the German race. By the outbreak of World War II, the SS is divided into three main branches: the Allgemeine SS, the general wing of the SS with no specific function; the SS Totenkopfverbände, responsible for Germany's extermination and concentration camps; and several units that, shortly after the Polish campaign, will be unified into the Waffen-SS, the operational military wing of the organization. Now, the SS is a separate, independent part of the armed forces. It belongs to the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, and are not part of the National Armed Forces, the Wehrmacht. This division of power is part and parcel to Hitler's method to rule by division, to create competing, semi-autonomous forces within the Nazi regime's sphere of control. This will be a constant source of conflict between the SS and the Wehrmacht, and already during the Polish invasion in 1939, the SS becomes the subject of criticism for their rashness, brutality, and murderous actions. But during the Polish invasion, the Waffen-SS also quickly establishes itself as an elite force, if only because it has demonstrated its capacity for exceptional cruelty against civilians. By 1940, with the Scandinavian and Western European campaigns under its belt, the Waffen-SS constitutes some of the most feared units of the Nazi war machine, fighting not only for the glorious expansion of the German nation, but also dominance of the German race. It almost seems ironic, then, that already in 1938, Himmler authorizes one of its regiments, SS Germania, to begin accepting volunteers from neighboring countries. As we will see, this fits the Nazi concept of nation, although it might at first appear surprising considering how strict the criteria, especially the racial limits, to join the SS have been. Himmler's original conditions required recruits to be under age 23, to be at least 170 centimeters tall, have no eyesight problems, no teeth fillings, and be able to prove their Aryan ancestry back to at least the year 1800. Even with proof of their genealogy, applicants might still be subject to racial biological examination if their appearances arouse suspicion of alien heritage. Now, these criteria exclude so many people that the physical requirements are never fully enforced and often amended. In 1938, Himmler concedes that a small number of dental cavities is not grounds for rejection. The height criteria are lowered, and volunteers needing glasses are permitted. But even with these more lax conditions, accepting foreign volunteers could seem counter to the idea that this is an elite German force. Well, the Nazis are much more obsessed with race than they are with nationality. In other words, if your blood is of German origin, then your nationality is only of secondary importance. So technically, Norwegians, Danes, Swedes, Britons, Swiss, Alsatians, Dutch, Flemish, and many more are all German. Now, this notion is interpreted to differing degrees by the Nazi leadership, but Himmler is especially racist. In his worldview, all Nordic or Germanic people should be united under German leadership. Foreign recruitment, therefore, fulfills an ideological dream. Though later SS recruits from more distant countries will mostly be expendable shock troops, those from the Germanic tribes provide the foundation for a new greater German Reich. As Himmler says himself, I really do have the intention to gather Germanic blood from the whole world, to rob it, to steal it, wherever I can. But as much as he wants to steal this Germanic blood, initial recruitment into the Germania regiment is pretty disappointing. By May 1940, just before the Third Reich launches its invasion of Western Europe, only 111 volunteers have signed up for the regiment. On April 20th, 1940, less than 2 weeks after the invasion of Denmark and Norway, he receives authorization from Hitler to recruit volunteers for a new regiment named SS Standarte Nordland. In Norway, he has support for this idea by the collaborators organized by Wieke and Quisling, but in Denmark he faces the problem of a collaborative but still reticent Danish government with some autonomy. Here, recruitment is secretive. Volunteers are drawn from National Socialist Party or the small German minority along the border. They are then smuggled into Germany for their training, usually in Senheim, Alsace. Himmler's expectations for this regiment are relatively modest, ordering that Scandinavians need to make up only half of Standarte Nordland. The rest can be German. As the Western invasion proceeds, he turns his attention to Dutch and Flemish recruits. The new Westland regiment is officially established on June 6, 1940, and later that month he orders that it should be fully staffed with volunteers within 4 weeks. The hope that these regiments will swell with Nazi-minded volunteers doesn't come true. In December 1940, the Germania Nordland and Westland regiments are all incorporated into the newly established SS Viking division. And still, by the summer of 1941, on the eve of Operation Barbarossa, this 20,000-strong unit has only 1,100 non-Germans fighting in it. The largest contingent here is 630 Dutchmen, followed by 290 Norwegians, 216 Danes, 1 Swiss, and 1 Swede. Admittedly, a great many more had volunteered, but the stringent racial and physical criteria mean that many never made it past selection. In, for instance, Denmark and Norway, 50% of all volunteers are turned away. But there's another big reason for the low numbers. Many volunteers who do pass selection soon become disenchanted by the ideological direction of the force. They might agree with many of the tenets of Nazism, like anti-Semitism, anti-Marxism, and militarism, but the racial nationalism doesn't gel well with some of the recruits. The SS leadership anticipates some of this resistance and, for instance, refashioned the oath of allegiance for foreign recruits, so they pledge themselves to Hitler as leader of the Germanic peoples, rather than the Chancellor of the German Reich. However, many are still unhappy about the pretty obvious impulse of SS trainers to Germanize them. One disgruntled Dutch volunteer writes to his family that if I stay here for 4 years, I will become completely Germanified. He is not alone. 80% of all Danish volunteers that pass the criteria refuse to even take the oath and decide to return home. So this leaves us with the question, what kind of people are willing to take the oath? Why do they choose to fight for a regime which has just conquered their native country? Ideological motivation is the most obvious factor. Letters home from Scandinavian volunteers training at the Waffen-SS school in Klagenfurt reveal clear commitments to the cause. One recruit writes to his family that, I want you to know that I'm returning packed with a full load of enlightening National Socialism, which will make an impression on my surroundings. Most recruits were previously connected to the Nazi movement in some way, but this does not entirely explain their signing up. Some want a better life or are fleeing difficult circumstances at home. Some simply relish the sense of adventure. One Swedish volunteer writes in his diary after signing up that he is doing so because he is sick and tired of sharpening pencils and pushing papers in neutral Sweden. So there are a variety of factors here, all existing alongside each other. Anti-Semitic beliefs mixed with economic practicalities, dreams of a new world order, or difficulties at home, like broken young marriages or complicated family relations. And although it is only a meager force right now, when the war progresses, the ranks of the SS Foreign Legions will swell. Overall, around 50,000 Germanic volunteers will be recruited throughout the whole war. And soon, after the commencement of Operation Barbarossa, Himmler will begin looking further afield to fuel Hitler's brutal war against the Soviet Union. Manpower will be recruited from Croatia, Ukraine, Bosnia, Hungary, and from all over the world. By the end of the war, nearly half of the 900,000 Waffen-SS fighters will be foreign-born non-Germans. We will cover how this happens at a later date, but already at this point, this small cadre of Germanic volunteers are ready and waiting to carry the Nazi crusade into Eastern Europe. Denounced as traitors by their native countries, they will only become more fanatical and brutal. Fighting and dying for a country they were never born in, they will wage a ruthless war of subjugation and be a significant part of the power behind some of the worst atrocities any armed forces has ever brought down on humanity. Now, the SS is in many ways the ultimate symbol of Nazi ideology of violence, but it was by no means only the SS that embraced the divisive hatred, militarism, and oppressive program of the Nazi Party, nor did they perpetrate their crimes against humanity separately and without the support of the Wehrmacht. In Germany, this ideology enjoyed support from as much as 80% of the population who approved of Hitler and Nazism. To understand how that developed, check out our Between Two Wars video about how Hitler created the Third Reich right here. In times like ours, when crisis and change fuels a political discourse based on a perceived struggle between ideas of us versus them, we should never forget the effects that this had back then. Here at Time Ghost, we do our best to document it simply as it were, free of ideological presumptions and without an agenda to promote simple solutions. Become a part of this effort by joining the Time Ghost Army on patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Never forget,